Welcome back, viewers, to another edition of the Heads Up podcast. And as you can see, we're back to a team of three this week with myself, Neil, and our guest, David Walsh, joining us for the second time. So we kind of scared him off too much last time. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah, good afternoon. Great to be here.
Good to see you back again, David, for part two. We had a lot of requests for you to come back and sort of follow on from things you said last time and some new things as well. So got a heap of questions. We'll get stuck into those once we get some housekeeping out of the way.
We should touch on last week, Neil, because the South Australian Oaks was run, and in our preview, you were keen on Toffee Tongue, and she did the business, winning a Group 1 as a maiden, which of reasonably unusual feat. I can think of Seamus Award winning a Cox Plate, but I'm sure there's others. But yeah, good picking there, and a good ride too by Damien Thornton up the rail.
It was. You could sort of see him, pinching runs along the rail there, and it came through on the inside. And that was the winning of the race, really. So draws do win races and didn't cover an inch of extra ground through it. Good to have punting last week, actually, too. Good track at Sydney.
The 2-year-old in the Robert Sangster just found the going a bit tough for that away game. But what about the ride on Sunlight? Did you notice that ride, David? The head-on Sunlight. I think the jockey, trying to think who it was now, basically stuck about 12, 14 wide in that first 400 metres before coming to the turn, the first turn.
He went straight ahead from his barrier, didn't he? And clearly him and his trainer, they'd walked the track earlier in the day, and I think they decided the fence was no good, and they decided where they thought the best part of the track was, and then they duly won a couple. So I guess it was pretty easy to do that on Sunlight when she, but you got to keep in mind, I mean, it might look a bit odd doing that, but you're not actually covering any ground. You're going in a completely straight line there for quite a while. So it doesn't really matter when you come over and to join the field. And actually, sometimes you're better to just come over quieter and a bit more steady and a bit later, because you're doing less work that way. So, as I say, it might have looked a bit odd, but I didn't see it as a negative. And just on the day, she just wasn't up to it. Maybe the inside might have appeared to be off earlier in the day, but a few horses did win up the inside later. So it might have been one of those cases where they started overdoing it a little bit.
Yep. The Aussie punters, they love to have a crack at jockeys when they see something that they think isn't quite right. But I agree, wouldn't have mattered what happened. She just wasn't on her game and ran a distant last. So certainly wasn't the ride that cost her the win. Anything else?
Super filly, isn't she? So it's the first poor race she's ever really run. So it'd be really interesting to, I haven't heard if there's any veterinary issues later on, but it would be very interesting to know how she pulled up. So it certainly wasn't the Sunlight that we all know and love, was it?
Yeah. Not at all. Any other comments, Neil, from last week? Or
no, just looking forward to tomorrow. Actually, another decent track. We can look forward to Sydney and Morphettville too. I see there's rain forecast there for tomorrow.
Is there? Okay. So the South Australian Derby's the big go tomorrow, which when we go over here, race 8 on the program at Morphettville, 2,500 metres. Neil, that's obviously the biggest factor you want to consider. Can the horse get that journey? And favourite Dalasan, you wouldn't have picked him to be a stayer in the spring, and but he's won his last two very impressively. He's the $2.80 favourite on the market I'm looking at, with the VRC Derby winner Warning second favourite at 4s, and the lightly tried but highly talented Russian Camelot third favourite at 4.40. But you're going to tell me none of those three are going to win.
Hopefully not. No, Dalasan, I think a lot of hard racing. 280 is just too short for me, up to 2.5. Warning, he goes better this way round. The Sydney way round didn't suit him. He was hanging. And he's a sort of horse, he's a big horse, isn't he? He's a huge horse. Whether that 3 draw is going to be against him. I'm just looking for a horse that I know is in really good form from the right stable, the Wallace stable, number 5, Miyake. We were on him last start. He was well back. They got a decent tempo in the race, and he was going to win a long way out. He just weaved through along the inside there and won strongly. His Damn Star Attraction, I think it is, ran a close second in the South Australian Oaks here back in 2014, I think it was. and he just looks like a stay. He relaxes, he'll drop back, and I'm sure David, the key to these races, aren't they, David? I suppose is for a horse to be able to relax.
Yeah, they've got to sort of settle. 2.5 is a long way, and for them. And even though we're well into the autumn and nearly winter time, a lot of these horses, I mean, they'll never go 2.5 in their life, and it's just so you really got to do your homework and sort of take a punt really on something you think will get the trip. I mean, for that reason, well, you've got to give Warning a chance because he won the Derby in Flemington in the spring. In November, so he's proven at the trip, and as you say, he's back to his favourite way of going. He's got a much better barrier. I know you used to think 3 might be disadvantaged, but I'd rather be. You don't want to be going 3 and 4 wide around that first bend and getting parked the first half of the race, because if you do, you're probably screwed. So, I mean, you can afford to cover a bit of ground later in the race, but you won't be able to do it both ends. So, if I was backing something in that race, I really want something you think was going to be at least one out, if not on the fence, with a lap to go, and doing no work for the first half, and that gives Warning a big chance, I would have thought. But really interesting looking through that field, the pedigrees of stallions, like Declaration of War, but you got Russian Camelot's, terrific stars. What was it, about 5 of them in the Melbourne Cup list last year. Miyake, well, he's a Deep Impact, who's a super stallion, from Japan. So Tim Stocks, reliable man. So yeah, there's plenty of proven stallions there in that race. So
that's always a good race. I see the first couple of races are on the inside track, and they go to the outside track. So something to be aware of.
Excellent. We had a question last week, Neil, for someone to win a multi, and that question was, when was the first day back of New Zealand thoroughbred racing post COVID-19? And 8 people were clever enough to work out that it was the 3rd of July. Is it, Riccarton?
Yeah, 3rd of July.
3rd of July, Riccarton. David's back out, and looking forward to that. Hopefully, it's not going to be too wet. Well, you won't mind because you need some rain down there, don't you? You need some rain all over the country. So we're all looking for, and I will be previewing South Island meetings now with a lack of North Island meetings. So I mentioned that during the week. Had a few requests about that. So and we had
8 people. We'll get David to. He's our lucky drawer. Pick a number, David, between 1 and 8, inclusive. 6.
6. Ian S. Well done, Ian. Regular subscriber, and I'll put your multi up tomorrow morning sometime and try and get a winner or a couple of winners for you.
We've got a slight change of tack in terms of our new question for next week. We're going back. You need to be thinking back 33 years ago, nearly 1987, back when David was in his absolute prime, riding winner after winner. But we're going to talk rugby. World Cup, first ever World Cup was held in New Zealand. First game was New Zealand versus Italy. We want to know that was who scored, or what was significant about the first try scored in that game. If you can remember that far back, email or text your answers through to Neil, and you'll be in the draw for next week's multi.
Yep, FormPro at formpro.co.nz or 027 352 6402 by Monday night, and you'll be into that draw for next week. Right. Back to bouquets. I've got
we'll quickly touch on those. I've got one bouquet actually.
There you go.
If either of you were aware, during the week, Tuesday and Wednesday, a group of guys basically formed a punters club similar to what the Boys Get Paid have done here in New Zealand over in Australia, and they concentrated on Warrnambool, but other meetings as well. They started with about 290,000, and they were betting over 2 days. I think after the first day, they were down to about 220, 230, and then they weren't going too flash on the second day, and they were down to about 80,000. So things were looking a bit grim. But they snagged 3 winners late in the piece to finish at about 360 grand. So a late comeback, and just the publicity and I think they're up for about another 200 grand if that Nashville Sound had won the last race at Morphettville, at Warrnambool as well. So he just missed out there. But good recovery from the lads. So yeah, the Little Birdie Punters Club, just amazing, isn't it, Neil? You run a few of these now, and then how much people enjoy sitting back and just watching, being part of one of these punters clubs where their $10, $20, $100, whatever, is part of a bigger pool, and they can boast to their mates that they've got 10,000 on this or 20,000 on that, and they really feel a part of it. And it seems to be punters clubs are definitely growing in popularity.
Yeah, they sure are. I think it's a great concept, and all the pressure's on the person running the punters club. But if you do your homework well, you do your best, and sometimes everyone is happy and they win, sometimes they don't, but people realise that. And it's when everyone's winning, it's just a great feeling. I remember Tauranga a couple of times, involved Ruby Amani winning for us. Like being in a rugby game when she hit the front there, it was great. It's fun.
Yeah, just to follow on with what you said, about those guys getting 3 winners late. So what's the moral of the story? Never give up.
Yeah. Keep going until you're broke.
Keep going until you run out, because you never know, you might get out in the last race. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, we've all been there, got out of jail on the last race for some punters clubs, and it is a good feeling, like you say, Neil. You got any bouquets or brickbats?
Oh, just not really a brickbat. It's just a note to trackside with the wall-to-wall racing we have on TV. It'd be good if they could move that third of the screen where they have all the next race prices up. Just take it away for the race or do something, because you can't see the horses in front, what they're doing. Sometimes down the straight, you'll get the 3rd, 4th and 5th horses, but you can't quite see the leaders. It's just frustrating. A little thing they could quite easily, I reckon. Anyway, it's good to see all the racing going, isn't it? Crikey, we could have no racing.
Absolutely.
Complaining, should we? Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't be. Yeah. Right.
Shall we move on, and we'll put Mr. Walsh in the hot seat. You've got some questions from viewers from a couple of weeks ago after our first segment, and then I'm going to test him on his memory, a few different aspects of his career, see what he can remember about years gone by and horses that he might have ridden. So you want to kick off with a couple of questions, Neil?
Yeah, and we'll score them out of 10 as well. Right, yeah. Our first question for my reader is, or listener, is what was the fairest track you ever raced on in terms of fairness?
Trentham.
Trentham. Oh, why is that?
Well, whether it be wet or dry, it didn't matter. You could always go to Trentham and ride a race. Whether you're on a front running horse or a back running horse, you could always be patient and ride a proper race. Whereas a lot of other tracks, you get dictated to, and you sort of got to ride to the pattern of the track or the pattern on the day. Whereas Trentham, it didn't really matter what day it was. You could always ride a proper race and be patient.
That's because of the long straight?
Well, yeah, but it's no longer, Trentham's no longer than a lot of other straights in the country. Just, for whatever reason, you could just sit and wait. And to me, the race never really started till the 300 at Trentham, even the 250, you didn't really need to even move till you got to there. And that's sort of that's really how we were taught to ride when we were kids. That was the thing, the longer you waited, the better, and the more patient you were. And it was always great to go back to Trentham, because you could always just drop back to that style of riding. And as I say, whether it be a front runner or a back runner, you didn't have to be, pushing the go button until nearly at the 200.
Right, yeah. Okay, next question is concerning weight. Is weight more of a burden over a longer distance, like a middle distance, compared to a sprint for a horse? That horse carrying 58 kilograms in the old days in a sprint would have had more effect on its last 50 metres than a middle distance race.
Well, it's always, it depends on the horse real as well, but I would have to say that it probably makes less of a difference in a sprint. The longer the distance of the race, the longer you've got to carry that extra weight, I think the more it does make a difference. And that's probably why we saw, forever, basically, horses that you never heard of winning these 2-mile races on the minimum weight. In the old days of carrying 48s and 49s and those sort of lighter weighted horses won most of the races, and they might that, we often got $40 shots, $50 shots, and horses that really didn't appear to have any form, but won the Cups, the Auckland Cups, and the Wellington Cups. And the main factor is the weight. So I think that definitely makes more of a difference over the longer distance.
Interesting, because when I do my sort of calculations, obviously you've got to take into account how much the horse is going to improve, what sort of run it's going to get. But all things being equal, I allow 2.5 kilograms per length up to 1,200 meters. And then when they get up to a middle distance, I allow 1.5 kilograms per length. But the more weight, it needs more weight to slow it down in a sprint. That be fair, you reckon?
Yeah, I guess that sounds probably about right. But I mean, as I say, every situation will be different, because we've seen some great weight carriers and over many years, like if you go back to a horse like Good Lord, for example, he was winning the Wellington Cups with big weights, and there's been plenty of horses like that, probably more in years gone by. But they're more the exception than the rule. And and even if we just go look at back in New Zealand in the last couple of years, there's hardly been a cup race won by a horse that hasn't been on the minimum. Whether it be the Auckland Cup, the Wellington Cup, the New Zealand Cup, the Evernow, any feature race is just about always won by a horse. If it's not on the minimum, it's only just off it,
Yep.
So that's got to tells you something.
There's a horse last Saturday at Sydney that won the last race. It dropped from 60 kilograms at its last race, dropped to 53.5 kilograms. Glenn Boss rode it. We got it on the quaddie, and the main reason I suggest we take it was because it dropped from that 60 kgs to 53.5 kgs. It was second up off some good closing sectionals, off a moderate tempo. That's a horse dropping significantly by 6.5 kgs. It dropped. That's a big weight drop. A horse would feel that, wouldn't it?
Oh, it's a huge, and obviously it was going up in class to get that weight drop, but it's the up in class is certainly counteracted by the weight drop. Like we talk about 3 and 4 kilo claimers and the difference that makes. How 7 kilos makes a huge difference. And when horses are on the minimum weight, they sort of run like they got nothing on their back. It does make a big difference to them.
So a horse, being a rider, you would know 100% this. Horse must feel more confident, does it? And that last 100 metres to let down with a lighter weight and a bigger weight. I think. Any feelings on that? Any thoughts?
Well, they just keep running. Whereas the horse that's carrying the big weight, if he's had to do any work in the running and worked a bit hard, they start to run back, halfway down the straight, and they get inside the 200, and then they just seem to start plugging away. Whereas the lighter weighted horses, they just keep running basically, and they're almost running like they've got nothing on their back, and that's the difference.
That's interesting. Signs that a horse, this is say in the bird cage, signs that a horse is ready to win or not ready to win. 1 or 2 things on either side. I know we've talked about horses sweating up before.
Yes, sweating up actually, for some horses it's quite a positive, especially in hot countries. They say like Singapore and those sort of places, like if a horse is dry coated and doesn't sweat, they don't normally perform very well. And the ones that sweat, if that's the norm for them, it's actually always a good sign. We don't probably see it quite as much here because we don't get the extremes of that like very there's humidity. But if a horse is sweating up a bit and it's a clear sweat, it's not a problem. But if it's frothy, if they're frothing up on the neck where the reins sit and maybe between the back legs, that's not a good sign, and it just suggests they're short of a run. They're a bit fresh and underdone.
Yeah, I remember reading a book and looking at some videos on horse behaviour before races, and horses sweating up was a positive thing in a lot of aspects. So it was interesting to hear you say that. 1 or 2 things. One, where a rider's on the horse's back, it just goes out the bird cage, he gets on the grass and he suddenly leaps forward and wants to get into his work. That was always a very positive sign. Could that be true? Or?
Well, it depends on the horse. Like, there's plenty of horses who, like there's like you're looking at a horse that's happy and well, and he might be a free-going horse that does that anyway, and he's happy to get out on the track, but he might do that every day when he goes on the track anyway. But you get another horse that's pretty laid back and cruising. He'll just go at the birdcage and drop his head down and short stride to the barrier, and you think, oh, that doesn't look very good. But that might be just that horse's pattern. So you've got to be really careful on that one. A great example to me on that was many years ago. I was in Brisbane, and Te Akau had Darcy Brahma over there for the big what do they call it, the mile, the 2-year-old mile over there, Castlemate, I think they called it in those days.
Yeah.
And he was a very good horse, Darcy Brahma, and I think he got beaten in the size produce. But he always looked like he wanted to go to 1600, and he went down to the start. I actually thought I'd been riding work with him, and I thought he could win, just the way he'd been working and this form, and he was going forward. And I went and saw him going to the barrier, and he looked terrible. He took strides about 6 inches long, and he looked like, I wouldn't say he looked like he was lame, but he certainly wouldn't encourage you to back him on his action. Well, he came out and he just bolted it, So you've got to be really careful. Because a horse like that was a great example. He was a laid-back, cruisy horse, and you couldn't back him on as preliminary, and the race was a different kettle of fish.
It's interesting.
You sort of got to know. You sort of got to know the horse, and maybe you've seen it a few times to know what's normal and what's not normal.
There's a horse that ex-Kiwi used to race in Hong Kong called Thumbs Up, and often the presenter would say he's walking short. But he always walked short, but would always perform really well. So, like you say, it's good to know their habits, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a lot of them are quite lazy, and they might walk short, but they might move beautifully when they're galloping. So there's another horse that was a great example to me was a horse called Tantalize, who was probably the fastest horse with the fastest sprint of any horse I ever rode. For 200 metres, and if you went and rode him track work, you wouldn't give him two bob for him. You'd have come back and said to Don Grubb, was his trainer, he said, "Well, God, this thing feels terrible. You better get the vet to it." But when he took it out and galloped it the next day, it felt like a world better. So he was just a laid-back, cruisy, lazy horse, and he just didn't extend himself. But when he had to, he had an amazing acceleration. So they're all different. So you just got to be a little bit careful on that one.
Okay, go chucking 3
Well,
questions for David.
Funnily enough, Tantalize was one of my questions, so we'll segue nicely to that. You won 2 Group 1s on Tantalize, including the Telegraph, and as you said, probably you'd rate that as one of the greatest performances. I basically waited, like you said, till the 200 metres at Trentham and then just burst through the middle to win by a neck. But my question on that race is, do you remember who ran second that day? She was a pretty promising filly. She herself won the Bayer Classic.
Princess Dram.
Princess Dram?
Yeah.
That's
one out of 1 so far. Well done.
We should have odds on this, shouldn't we? Huh?
You want another one? You want another one?
Chuck another one.
Okay. Well, here's another one. This was a slightly different segue. September 1989, the Beamish Hawke's Bay Bloodstock Stakes, which I guess now we know as the Livermore Classic. You rode one of your probably favourite horses, Mr. Lamondi, to win as a 9-year-old. Won that race after quite a bit of a breakaway. The horse that ran second that day, you'd ridden you'd won 3 times on it, and you just mentioned the trainer's name before.
Yeah, it was Gatkin's Pride.
Yep, 2 out of 2. Gee.
It was actually a wet track, and he was a super wet track.
He was.
Gatkin's Pride, but Mr. Lamondi, he didn't seem to really matter what track he went on, as long as it wasn't really heavy. But when he won the Caulfield Cup, it rained, and if anything, he was probably a little bit better with a bit of sting out of the track. So.
Gatkin's Pride, just on that, started racing, and I think his second, third, and fourth starts, Neil, here you go, were at Trentham on the Winter Carnival when they used to race Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. He won on all 3 days that Winter Carnival of 1986. his winning margins were 3 lengths, 8 lengths, and 12 lengths.
Paul Taylor rode him, didn't he?
Twice, and Matthew Woods the third time.
Yeah.
Well done.
It was a big black horse, wasn't it? Big black
What's
horse.
that?
It was a big black horse.
Yeah. Dark horse.
I remember watching one of those races. They were really heavy tracks in those days.
He was an absolute. He was a plough horse. Yeah, he just loved it.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 out of 2 so far. Mr. Lamondi, he won the Caulfield Cup, like you said, 1986. Pretty easy question, this. I don't know why I'm asking it. You'll remember who ran second?
Back-to-back.
He then went on to win the McKinnon and the Melbourne Cup. 3 out of 3. All right, this one might test you. Don't know. Solve it. Horse, obviously, you won a Cox Plate on. You didn't ride him early in his career. Your first ride on him was in March 93 in the Air New Zealand Stakes. Group 1 race at Ellerslie, and you did win. Who was Solveit's previous regular rider before you got on board?
Grant Cooksley rode him a lot.
He rode him a couple of times, but another jockey rode him.
Tony Allen actually rode him a lot. Yeah.
You're good. You're good. 4 out of 4.
Yeah. Grant Cooksley won the Waterford Crystal Mile on him.
Yeah.
At Moonee Valley.
TK
Allen actually rode him most of his starts in New Zealand.
Yeah. All right. We'll see. We'll see if you can get the clean sweep. Here's one. This is a personal favourite of mine because I made a bit of money off it. Awapuni Gold Cup 2006. You rode a Murray Baker trained mare, and it was your first ever ride on her, and you won the Awapuni Gold Cup 2006.
I know the horse. I can't think of its name.
Ooh, stump the panel.
No, I can remember. She got back a bit, burst through them.
Correct. One easy.
What does it start with? What letter?
One word.
Short
starting with T.
Oh God, I know the horse too.
We got him.
I rode her a few.
You rode her a bit after that in a Group 1.
She ran second at Tirapa after that in that mare's race.
That's right, in the Travis. Yeah.
I know the horse. I just can't think of her name. So,
Tusker.
That's right. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Couple more. This one brings back memories, actually. And I probably need to ask you a question out of this question. But name this horse. Ran second in a. I won't give away too much. Second in a Manawatu Cup. 6th in a Melbourne Cup. 4th in a Brisbane Cup.
Liquidity.
Yeah. Now, did you train him as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you did.
Yeah.
He was pretty underrated, really, wasn't he?
Oh, he was a good horse. He was just that little tick off top class, and he was really unlucky in the Wellington Cup, that Flying Luskin won. Like whether he would have won, we just never know. But he never got a crack at them, a proper go. So he was unlucky, and he was one of the horses. He could win those lesser races and look like a world beater, and he just every time he got him the big runs, he just seemed to come up a fraction short. But he was extremely honest. And he was a least horse out of the paddock.
Yeah, I think he had 15 wins out of 41 starts or something.
Yeah, no, he's a good horse. He actually won the Tommy Smith ended up training him when he stayed in Australia, and he won the Queen's, what they call it, Queen's Plate or Queen something at Randwick. Okay. And one year, and the Queen was there, and she presented the trophy. And but he ran second or third in the Caulfield Cup. Later, he ran. I think he just got beaten in a Tancred. Couldn't quite crack a big one, but he was a very good horse. Yeah. By Everay out of Noble Vision area it was.
Yep, well done. Okay, now two questions from this day, a day you probably won't forget, the Marlborough Cup of 2014, Willie Duggan. Yeah. First question, who was the commentator that day?
Oh, is it Mark McNamara?
No.
Ooh. 14, so we're getting back 6 years, isn't it?
I remember the race. I remember the race. He was bloody commentator.
No, it's not a trick question.
Must have been someone from the north.
No.
Not T. Lee, was it?
No. He was the main commentator for that area at this time. He did quite a few Marlborough meetings.
No, you've got me.
Tom Wood.
Oh, what's
okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and he moved on not long after that. Correct. Yeah.
So you you circled the field and won down the outside with Willie Duggan. On the inside was Rick O'Shea, ran second. Past the line, you had a little word to the jockey of Rick O'Shea. Who was that?
Riley Williams.
Well done. Very good.
And
He's not bad, Neil. We'll keep him on. We'll give him an A plus out of for those questions.
No, it can't be an A plus. I got one wrong, so.
Well, you just couldn't remember it.
Minus, yeah.
Can you reveal the word you said to him?
No.
What goes on Thursdays on tour? Fair enough. Yeah. Hey, we touched on it before about training. You had a stint at training. When was that, and how did you enjoy that?
Oh, I've actually had several stints of training. Many years ago, the first horse I ever trained actually won. It was when I was actually hadn't been in North Island that long. In Garthlock, we had this little filly, and it was a bit erratic, and he couldn't be bothered with it. And I said, well, I had some speed, so I said I played around with it for a while and won a trial or two in the north and took it to Reefton. It won its first start, and it got sold. So that was only trained that short period just for that for that horse. And then and like you talked about equity, I was living in Feilding at the time, and decided to bought a property out the back of Feilding. So went training, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved it actually. Get a great deal of satisfaction out of it. And actually back then, when I think back, I only had 10 or 12 horses, but 5 or 6 of them were open grade or running in good races. Had a horse called Moonstorm, won the John Gregg Stakes at his third start.
The Varmint?
Well, that was later. Yes. But Imperial Air, she won the Sir Tristram Classic at Te Rapa. She ran third in the 1,000 Guineas at about a 4th start. Had some pretty handy horses back then, and then later years started training out of Awapuni. And Varmint, he was a grand old horse. He won 11 races, over 3 or 4 years there. But he was a terrific horse.
Were you riding?
Estimonte probably was potentially the best one of them, but he won the Wellington Stakes at his 4th or 5th start, and he went to Hong Kong and actually won a good race over there. So, but no, I love the training, but. The problem with the training was the better the training went, the worse the riding went, because the trainers didn't want to put you on. Even though he always said to me, look, stop giving me rides, and I'd been riding a lot when I was, Yeah. I said, oh, what's going on? You're not giving me any rides. And he said, oh, you're training. He says, I can't put you on. And the trainers had this thing in their head that you might take a horse off them, So you wouldn't do that. But I mean, that's just the way they felt. So. And it is, as we know, training. It's you get a great deal out of it, but it's actually extremely difficult to make money out of it. Yeah. And as I said, the better the training was going, the worse the riding went. So I flagged it, and just carried on riding, which was obviously the correct thing to do.
Later on, you trained at one of the thoroughbred breeders, didn't you?
Yeah. I had that was sort of not that long after those days, and I went to I was private training for Westbury Stud there for a period. Yeah. A little mare called Zerna. So
she was good.
Yeah, she was a good mare too. Yeah.
And
her form was terrific leading up to it, and then she went off to Singapore after that, and she ended up with horse there in Singapore, and wasn't much she didn't win over there. So she was a good mare, and she's actually been a pretty reasonable brood mare as well. She's left some handy horses.
Was it Andrew Corder who rode her?
Correct. Yeah.
On the topic of riders, who was your hardest or the toughest rider you ever rode against that you remember?
Oh, they were all pretty tough in the old days. Like, when I moved from the South Island to the north, it was quite a eye opener, really. We had plenty of good riders down here. Don't worry about that. But when you went up there, and all of a sudden you had Bill Skelton and Maurice Campbell and Gary Phillips and Jimmy Walkers and all those sort of guys that, they were all top riders. It was a different ball game. They rode a lot tighter than we were used to riding down here. To be fair, probably a lot cleaner, but tighter. And I learned I really had to shape up and take it all in. And yeah, like the one thing about it in those days, jockeys sort of tended to have their place in a race, and a lot of the riders rode sort of consistently the same. So it was probably reasonably easy to do race patterns.
Yeah.
But they were, we had big fields, 18 runners all the time, 20 on some occasions, and they rode tight. And yeah, so I had to learn shape up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, latterly in your career, Lisa Allpress, she's a rider I really admire. She was very much like you, would look for any advantage she could find. She'd walk the track. And remember once at Wanganui, I backed a horse and it got beaten, and it was only because of her tactics coming around that top bend. It was a heavy track. She came out wide. And later I asked her about that ride. She said, yeah, I just knew where to go and where to push it wider. So how was she to ride against?
Oh, well, Lisa was like any rider on a good horse. They're always hard to beat,
Yeah.
But, we touched on Lisa 2 weeks ago, and I said that she's a true believer in track bias, and and she's super fit. She's probably as fit as any jockey, if not any other jockey out there.
Yeah.
She's not racing, she's working on the farm, or she's riding a horse somewhere or doing something. So no, she is completely committed and just passionate about what she does. So no, but as I say, it didn't matter. It was always the jockey that was on the best horse that was always the hardest to beat. So.
One of the things I do before a race, one of the first things I do was try and work out a speed map. When you were riding, you would know in your head, you maybe not do a physical speed map, but how important was that to know the type of horse you were riding and how you saw the speed was going to come from initially or late in the race?
Yeah, well, I'd always have a pretty good idea in my head what I thought was going to happen, and 9 times out of 10 it didn't. So as I said last time, you can make all these plans, and when the gates open, you forget them and just ride the race as it happens, because all your planning will come back to you at the right time. I remember one day at Wellington, I rode a horse called Al Honoon, who was a really good horse as well. He won about 16 races, and it was one of the few races I could ever say that, well, the speed map worked out perfect. And every horse was in the position where I thought they would be. I ended up winning the race. And I actually remember coming back and saying that, well, after that, I happily retire now because that was perfect. But it hardly ever happened. Hardly ever happened before and hardly ever happened since, because it doesn't matter how you do the speed map, it hardly ever works out.
Yeah.
What happens if you got a situation where you're on a noted front runner and you're going through the race book in the jockey's room and you see there's another horse that's also pretty much a keen front runner? Do you ever say to the jockey, if they're sitting in the room nearby, are you going to lead on this, or are you going to let me have the lead, or do you try and discuss a little bit of that pre-race, or you just let it unfold?
Well, no, you often did have a bit of a chat to the rider, maybe at the barrier, after they've had their instructions. But it would be pretty rare to get into a situation, especially with a senior rider, where there'd be a speed duel. You see that with apprentices at times, But the senior riders, they always make a decision pretty quick, and a lot, as I said to you last time, a lot of the horses used to run for me for whatever reason, and whether they'd be out the back for some riders, they'd be up handier for me and running, and I never used to take it off them, and most, to be honest, most riders were probably quite happy to let me go to the front, because at least they knew we were going the right speed. Whereas a lot of them, they got to the front and actually didn't actually know how fast they're going, or they just go slow enough to let someone come up outside them, and then they were comfortable, but maybe didn't have the confidence to actually go the speed that they felt was correct. So
that segues quite nicely into my next question. One of my subscribers, Pedro, had a horse called Al Blitzen, and halfway through its career, it got in the habit of being just terribly away from the gates. It'd stand there, miss the jump, just be totally away. And we discussed this, and I said, well, the person you want to get that sorted out is David Walsh. And can you pick up the story from there? I mean, either the trainer contacted you and asked you for the ride, or how did that come about?
You can't exactly remember now, but Robert Prescott trained the horse.
Yeah.
He was a pretty reasonable horse as a younger horse, and then he, as I say, was getting into that bit of a habit of missing the jump. But he always seemed to get away okay when I rode him. I think the first time I rode him was in the Winter Cup.
Yep.
At Rakuten, and he ran third or something. And he actually had a really good year that year. He ended up winning the mile at Alpuni. I'm not sure which mile it was because they have a few of them. But
The Muriel metric mile.
Yeah. And I remember actually walking around the birdcage and absolutely hosed down just before the race, and it just suited him. He just loved it. And then he went to Matamata and he won the Matamata Cup as well. So no, he was a pretty good little horse. And he won. I think he won the year or so later. He won the mile at Hawke's Bay. You know, the first day of the carnival. And yeah, he was a good, honest horse. Wasn't top class, but he was a good money spinner for his connections.
Now, on both of those wins, the Muriel Metric Mile and the Matamata Cup, you led all the way. Were your pre-race plans that if you jumped well, you would lead, or just as a pandemic?
No, I never used to make plans like that. I just read the speed and see what happened. And but I was always prepared to take the front if no one else wanted it. Yeah. And what actually happened a lot was quite often, as I said last time, there'd be 12 horses in a race and 10 of them are told not to lead. So, you know, or say there's 5 that can be handy and they're always told not to lead. So, as I said, I end up leading by default quite a lot. So, you know, it's a matter of just reading the speed and being confident enough to back your own judgment, really.
Here's a question for you. We had James McDonald on the Boys Get Paid podcast last week, and he can still remember a spray Alan Sharrock gave him after a maiden race at Hara from about 2009. Can you remember any trainer really giving it to you after you came back on what they perceived might have been a poor ride?
I can't exactly remember the exact details, but I think on both occasions they got back as much as good as they gave. So, yeah.
Being a jockey and a trainer, you can be like that.
I can recall. I won't name the trainer, but I was at Waterloo and you were there, David, and you rode the horse, and it was just slow away. Had no really pace over a sprint. You were 3 or 4 lengths last behind the field, riding it up, and you ran home well for about 4th or 5th, and the trainer got stuck into you. And I thought, Jesus Christ, that's a bit. Right? And you just sort of stood there, smiled, and walked off, as though you'd been there, done that before. So, as a rider, you've got to have a thick skin, don't you? You know, it's always your fault, never the trainer's fault or anything else. So,
yeah. Well, the jockey's always an easy target, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right.
The punters can stick at them on the websites, and the trainer can give it to them, straight away. And unfortunately, it does happen, and it shouldn't. It's unprofessional. There are some trainers, and you've got to respect them for this. That if they're not happy, they won't even go and see you straight after the race. So if you haven't seen them, they're not happy, and you'll see them an hour later or half an hour later, and they've cooled off, and then things are sort of back to normal. So some of them they like to have a bit of a moan, and then they'll get it off the chest and they're fine. But actually, it is unprofessional and it shouldn't happen. And, there has been the occasion when, there's been trainers taken the room and spoken about it. And we actually see in Australia a bit, where trainers have been fined, even jockeys have been fined for getting into an altercation like that. And it isn't professional and it shouldn't happen. And so the ones that take themselves away, don't go near you after the race, that's the best way to approach it, because, an hour later when they've had a look at the film and cooled down a bit, they might have a completely different perspective. So.
Have you ever come back to scale or after a race where you've ridden a perfect race, the horse hasn't won, and the trainer said, "Oh, yeah, sorry, trainer fault there. I didn't quite have that horse fit enough on the day." How often would a trainer put their hand up and say, "Yeah, I stuffed up"?
Oh, no, it actually quite often actually, and often they say before the race, "Look, it's not quite ready. This isn't Melbourne. This isn't its Melbourne Cup. It's going to improve." Particularly when trainers and those open races are setting horses for those bigger cups, and they're trying to keep the weights right. You always did your best, you're trying to win, but you did know sometimes that horses weren't quite fit, and those sort of days, a lot of those horses, they wouldn't win till they're 6th or 7th or 8th start in the campaign. The whole, 7 or 8 months have been spent targeting one race.
Yeah,
and,
setting the horse for the race.
Yeah, exactly. And that's quite common. So no, it's not uncommon for a trainer to say that. But,
after your last ride at Ashburton, correct me if I'm wrong, but you went to Mauritius?
correct. Yep.
Why did you go there for? What was the money? I presume was a big factor. But...
Well, no, I just got offered a job. I was sort of starting to. I wasn't really going to at that stage ride a lot longer. I was going to ride into the following year, but I was sort of looking at it as sort of probably my last year, and the opportunity came to go to Mauritius, so I took it. And unfortunately, I only rode there one day, and then I got crook and ended up in hospital. So that was it anyway. But it was a beautiful place.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back at some point and just have a look around. It's I was in paradise. It's if you love racing, golfing and fishing, it's paradise. It's beautiful. And the weather's fantastic as well.
Home country of Ashvin Gondasamy, isn't it? Mauritius.
Well, a lot of the boys are from Mauritius. Actually most of them from Canterbury are from there. If you're a jockey in Mauritius, you're a movie star. So they all want to be a jockey if they can be.
With the wet tracks coming up in July when racing kicks off, this is something I've discussed with you at the birdcage before, and then horses, about the best type of galloping action for a heavy track. Horses galloping action can influence it not all the time, but what's your opinion about the best ideal action for a heavy track?
Yeah, well, it varies a lot because you can have horses with short strides and long strides that go on the wet track. The shorter striders probably tend to be your sprinters, and longer striders maybe your stayers. Yeah. But really, the best guide is a horse with maybe a slightly high knee action. Yeah. They do tend to handle the soft ground pretty well, whereas a horse with very low daisy cutting action, they don't normally. They normally need to have pretty good ground. Yeah. I mean, there's always exceptions, but that is certainly, if you want to back a horse and you're not sure it'll handle the wet, go and watch it do its preliminary and the track's soft or heavy and see how it moves through the ground in the preliminary, and you'll get a pretty good idea. If they look happy in it going down, that's normally a good sign.
If the horse is happy going on the ground, I've read about horses' ears, the way their ears react, forward, back, pricked, laid back. Can that be a clue to how happy a horse is or how keen it is to race?
Not really, because they're all different. So it's like some horses are quite gawky. They prick their ears and look at this and look at that, and other horses are very aggressive and they put their ears back, and if something comes beside them, and put their ears right back. And a lot of people, I've heard people say, "Oh, that horse is sour because its ears are flat back." Well, its ears are flat back because it's trying really hard, and that's how those are the other ones that consistently win in tight finishes because they just keep giving right to the line. So if their ears are back, it's a really good. It tells you they're really genuine and they're doing their best. Whereas a horse that are sort of half back or one ear back, half back, and one a bit forward, they're not completely focused. Yeah. And they're the types that they get the blinkers on and the shadow rolls and they get all the equipment on to try and make them focus more. So.
Okay. Now, after you retired from riding, I noticed you were at Addington Racetrack one night, and I don't know what are you up to there? And you got involved with Mark Purden and Nelly Rasmussen training outfit, and that must have been an interesting experience. Oh
no, it was terrific. No, well, that sort of followed on from after Mauritius when I came back to New Zealand, and I had an operation and took a couple of months to come right. So I'd spoken to Mark on numerous occasions, and I said to him, "Do you mind if I come out and have a bit of a look around?" So he said, "Good as gold." So I come out and started pottering around and watching a few horses and just seeing how they train them and what the processes were. And then, of course, went off to Addington, and next thing it's cut week, and I'm there at the races helping them cut week, and absolutely loved it. Yeah. So and when after a while I was driving, and actually I drove and work out around Addington one day, and absolutely loved that. It was fantastic. So. Right. Yeah. So prior to working for Thoroughbred Racing, I've been working for them for several months actually. So it was fantastic.
Never thought about getting into amateur driving at all?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Mark, and we did discuss it with Mark, and it was probably at one point before I got the job with Over Racing, it was, was on the cards to do that, because obviously it was, you can't be a junior driver if you're over 30. So if I wanted to actually drive at the races, you actually had to go through the amateur system, but which meant you could just go, you could get your ticket, drive at trials, and like any other driver or rider, you've got to prove that you're capable of being safe and have X amount of drives to make sure you know what you're doing. And as it was discussed, but for obvious reasons, it never went anywhere. But.
I know in the driver of a horse, I'd rather see you be in the sucker than someone like the goat in the sulky, because
weight doesn't matter when you're going along fast.
I reckon
only on wet grass tracks, I reckon. Although you look at Natalie, she's pretty slim and her UDR is unbelievable. So maybe there is something to it, Neil. But they reckon once you're up and mobile and rolling, the weight in the sulky doesn't have a huge impact.
Come on, Davey, get on my side. What do you reckon?
Oh, no, I agree with you, Neil. I think it makes a difference. It's got to make a difference. As say, once you're up and going, it might make less of a difference. But the fact is, they've got to get going, especially when standing starts, is quite a bit of energy used to get mobile. You know what I mean? If you're pulling Natalie, who weighs like 51 kilos, for example, or 52, maybe lighter, I'm not sure, compared to someone that weighs 80 or 90 or 100, and the horses are even, I know which one's going to get rolling, getting up and going faster with less effort. So I think it has to make a difference. And actually, I think the big guys that say it makes no difference, I think it's just an excuse to have another pie.
I will admit at that Commentators Day we had last month, a couple of months ago, just before lockdown, they had a few rugby guys come in and do a sulky race with the commentators in the bike, and it would be fair to say the lighter framed commentators, the likes of Philippa Morris and I think even Davey Mack, were the winners of the said races. So there might be something to it. I might just concede that point to you.
Yeah, well, it's. I think it's far more than coincidence that most of the best champion drivers over many years have been
quite slim,
smaller people that could actually have been jockeys at one point. So hey, there's exceptions. There always is. I mean, Dexter's, he's not short, but he's extremely lean and and fit. And Tony Hurler, Tony's not short either, but he's very lean as well.
We'll get off the topic slightly, but what makes Mark and Natalie such good trainers? Because their domination is just unbelievable in the harness code. It's their attention to detail and knowing each horse so well.
Well, firstly, it's they go and buy the horses they want, so that's where it starts. And then they're so well educated right from the beginning. They get broken in early. Every horse goes through the same process. They get broken in, they go to the stables, they work in, they go on the jog machines, they work in the cart when they're ready to go on the cart, they go on the cart, they work in race formation for 2 or 3, 4 weeks at a time. There might be 8 or 10 or even 12 if they've got enough drivers, 12 horses, 2-year-olds out there of a morning, or even yearlings at some point. Going around the track in not a race, but in a race formation. And every half a lap, the lead will change. So every horse start, wherever they were at the beginning, they get in every position in the field basically. So they're so well educated and extremely professional. Everything's done properly, and so no corners cut, and their records obviously speak for itself.
Maybe just a matter of doing everything, all those small things really well.
Yes, thoroughly professional. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether it's the biggest thing or the smallest thing. It's got to be done properly.
I know. I was there one day observing what was going on with somebody else. I've been with you, I think. Yeah, it was, I think. And they were so focused on what had to be done correctly. I remember saying to one of the staff members there, "No, that's not right. Do it this way." And it's those little things. really.
Yeah, and in particular with the trotting horses and that, and the gear they have is just amazing, and all the little things you can do that make such a difference, and fitting the gear on properly and then using it correctly, and it's like I was blown away when I went there, because all we have is a saddle and a bridle and a saddle and a breastplate and maybe a set of rings, and that's about it. The only other thing that gets changed is maybe blinkers or pacifiers or something. But there's only 5 or 6 things that could ever change, whereas with the pacing and trotting horses, it's just endless what can alter, and knowing what to alter and when to alter it. That's their expertise, and for example, Mark will be working a horse and if he's not happy, he'll bring it back in and change some gear and put something else on it, or alter the gear he's got, and then go back out and work it, and just stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the other trainers and stables don't do the same thing, but fact was I had experience there and I was blown away and how well everything was done.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I know you were out trying to catch a fish this morning, David, and didn't have much luck. And I know you like a good feed of fish and chips, and the goat's got a wonderful. I know you like the greyhounds too, and the goat's got a really good dog. It should be on later on this afternoon. You want to reveal it?
Well, the problem might be, Neil, that the podcast might not be put up in time by the time this dog races, but Neil's referring to Wanganui Greyhounds Race 4, number 9, a dog called Boys Get Paid. He should be winning that race, and then he'll win again next Tuesday at Palmy, drawing the red rug, I think, in race 2 from memory. But hopefully this gets up before 5:02 this afternoon and people get to this part of the podcast and hear it. If they don't, bad luck. You've missed out on a winner.
Blame me for making you late.
You quite like the dog, don't you, David?
Oh, look, I watched them consistently for a long time, but I haven't in recent times.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the Little Mothers and those sort of they were great to watch. So
yeah. And we're just about out of time, but what's one thing you're looking forward to when racing starts up again?
Oh, just getting back out, seeing the people, getting back to the races. I love the travelling and so catching up with people we haven't seen for a while, and whether it be, in Timaru or Wingatui or Invercargill or the occasional time we get Trentham or Warapuni, it's just great to get back and see the people. And I'm a racing nut, always have been. So.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else, Goat, you want to add before we sign off?
No, always a pleasure, and thanks for your time, David, and for your insight. And next time we have you on, I'm coming up with far harder questions than those ones.
You're right, yeah. Thanks very much, David.
I'll start studying.